Let me welcome both the gentlemen. Thank you so much for creating time. I'm going to see if we are able to describe the global situation in an hour or so. I'll start with a direct question, which, because of Prof's seniority, will give him the first bite. Agreed. How did we arrive at a situation where the United States is able to do what it did in Venezuela? From a point of view of US's own power, US's own values, and the values that they've been advocating for 200 years, the so-called rule-based order that underpins the United Nations is them. They are central to the establishment of global jurisprudence. But how did we arrive in a situation where they're able to enter a country militarily, abduct its president, and then say they are now running it, essentially colonizing Venezuela? Everybody sees that. I don't think if I asked you a year ago, you could have predicted anywhere in the world that a country as powerful as the US could carry out an act of that nature. But how did we get there?
I think there are a number of things that we can say. One is that hegemons, if we look at the history of hegemons, they come and go, and they go through phases. And if we look at the global history at this particular juncture, the United States has reached the peak of its power, and it won't go higher than before. All what is left is the decline. And here are signs, concrete signs that it is declining. If you look at the power of a state, mainly its economy, size of its people, the military, ability to influence others globally, to direct global policy. In case of United States, when it took over from Britain as the hegemon, it managed to a greater extent to bring about a global governance through the United Nations system in the post-1945. And therefore, that world order, the post-1945, essentially has always been the American order, in which, if you look at IMF, World Bank, United States, if you look at the United Nations and a number of agencies in the United States, there's centrality, the rule-based liberal order has always been in the United States. However, I think with time, we've seen other powers rise. Firstly, it was the independence of so many countries, and now the rise of other bigger powers, be it Japan in the 80s, and we saw how the United States moved quickly when it was challenged economically. The 1987, the Plaza Accord brought Japan to where it is now. It never recovered because of the manner in which the agreement was structured. It favored the United States. And the rise of China, we see the United States still battling, trying to bring China in the similar way as it did with Japan, to somehow slow its rise through agreements and the like. But I think with the global financial crisis of 2008, with COVID crisis, and we've seen that the United States is no longer trading country number one. It's now has given that power to China. We have seen that the United States remains the most powerful when it comes to military, with a budget estimate $1 trillion this year, and President Trump wants to take it up to $1.5 trillion next year. It's a powerful country. So I think it is safe to say, as much as it is declining, it's not a decline that tomorrow it's no more. The hegemon do not die overnight. They take time. They they die a painful death, and it's a slow, as we saw with Roman Empire and others. So it's a gradual, its power being chipped in different ways. So recently, to go directly to your question, why are we here? We are here because this rise of others, China in particular, that has challenged US more than any other country, and the rise of BRICS, we've seen that the US dollar remains the most powerful, and United States relies on it. So your Venezuela, your Iran, a number of countries, including Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, are no longer trading petrol using the dollar. They're now using their local currency. So what it does, it chips that power, and that's the ultimate power that the United States will never give up.
The threat of the dominance of the dollar.
That's why they're moving in Venezuela, try to control that oil. Its last ditch, try to defend. Of course, there's issue of Maduro and the cartels, and these are pretexts. The main aim is to have control, but it's not only Venezuela. I think there's countries such as your Nigeria, your Saudi Arabia discussions, your Iran. These are countries trying to regain that petrodollar power, which United States is losing gradually on a daily basis.
Would you agree with that assessment, Naeem? I'm thinking here, what's new? And Prof took a long route, but the dominance of the dollar vis-a-vis oil. But somebody can say, if you've been looking at the US since 1990, something like what happened in Venezuela is not really new. Gaddafi, if the Libyans would wake up and they would say, although there was a Security Council decision there, the reality is this is consistent with US aggression. Afghanistan, Iraq, there's nothing really new, but I don't know. What would your assessment be about how did we get to where the United States, it's worse. I mean, there's just a notch here that they say the next day, we're now in charge of Venezuela, and we are redrawing the map according to the Monroe Doctrine. The Western Hemisphere belongs to us.
So first, just on the Monroe Doctrine, I mean, they are misrepresenting the Monroe Doctrine. In fact, the Monroe Doctrine originally, from the 19th century, was about ensuring that countries in South America were able to be independent of the European colonial masters. That was the idea, not what is happening now. But to come to your original question, I think two assumptions here that we need to address. One is this notion of a rules-based order. Frankly, the so-called rules-based order was put into place very simply to protect European states, with the United States as the guarantor of that order. The whole notion of rules-based, rules of war, etc. Let's remember that at the beginning of the 20th century, right? So 100 years ago, they were talking about the rules-based order and rules of war while they were committing genocide next door, Germany, in Namibia.
Right?
Yes. So that idea we must interrogate of a rules-based order, that it was meant to serve the global north as we now refer to it. When the United Nations was formed after the Second World War, the majority of the states, they were colonial powers. And, countries like the United States. Colonized states mostly had not achieved their independence yet. And so, for example, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the idea of human rights, that term was inserted there by whom? Not by Kwame Nkrumah Jan Smuts, right? And when he spoke about human rights, and it became part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, he wasn't thinking of black people in South Africa or black people anywhere in the world. right? It was about Europeans. So that now is, so when you talk about Venezuela or Iran or Cuba, right, that rules-based order is not supposed to protect them. That it was never meant to. Now we go to the ICJ and we claim that, and that's what upsets them because it's really not meant for us. The second assumption is now, which you're now interrogating as well, when you say, how did we get here? No, this is not new. I mean, the entire South America, the United States has always regarded it, and the term they use, as their backyard, right? Where they can exert control as they like, when they like, where basically this entire continent was there for the exploitation by American companies, whether it's oil companies now, fruit companies in the past, or whatever the case might have been. And Noriega was kidnapped, others were assassinated, coups took place. I don't remember any American president declaring that he's the president of a country in South America, but that's neither here nor there. They put puppets into place. They did it in Iran in 1953. They did it in Iraq, right? They put into place, they flew in Ahmad Chalabi, parachuted him in to, and of course everyone rejected him, but to be the new leader of Iraq. So very similar kind of thing. It's just that now we have the president of the United States does things a bit differently, much more flamboyantly, and claims all kinds of credit for himself that doesn't belong to him. But it's not that new. This is how the United States has operated at least for 70 years.
If it's not new, then it must follow in your argument. You'll correct me if I'm wrong. If it is not new, then the US is not responding to the rise of China.
No, that doesn't follow. The methodology of how they do things is not new. And the reason is not new. The reason for them is, and now they're saying clearly, the Western Hemisphere belongs to the United States. Okay? That has been the case for decades. Usually it was the resources in South America that the Americans wanted. Again, whether fruit, oil, whatever the case might be. Now, as far as oil is concerned, the United States is essentially self-sufficient. Yes, there's an argument to be made that American crude is light crude, Canada and Venezuela have heavy crude, and so they need a bit of that. But essentially, the US is self-sufficient in terms of oil, right? So why do they need Venezuelan oil? They need to get Venezuelan oil so that China doesn't get it and Cuba doesn't get it. So it's no longer about we want oil for ourselves. We want to control oil so that we can determine who gets it. And oil, as Prof said, as David said, oil is critical from an American perspective because the whole notion of a petrodollar, the American dollar is propped up by oil sales. And that is becoming weaker and weaker because various countries, even Saudi Arabia, is now trading with China, not in dollars, for their oil. So getting control of Venezuelan oil is very much about China. It's the same methodology, the same purpose, control the resources, but it's also about preventing China and Cuba and, Marco Rubio's.
Yeah. I suppose then if one follows the oil, follows the dollar. That's the idea. If I follow the oil, I'm following the strength or the weakening of the dollar, the capacity of the dollar to still be the currency of exchange, the currency of reserves across the world. That explains Nigeria. I don't know if you want to expand on that. It explains Iran. Before we go to them, it doesn't explain Greenland.
Greenland comes in on another dimension of reasserting US hegemony. It is not only the dollar, which is an issue, it's also your trading routes, the ship lanes that are used. And Greenland sits at a very strategic place. Greenland is not far-fetched from South Africa. South Africa geographically, it sits at a very critical geographical area that should there be any war, global war, anyone that controls the cap has an upper hand. And therefore, from a missile and militaristic looking at the situation, Greenland becomes quite critical for United States. In any way, it's much closer to United States, and a number of activities, your China, your Russia, a number of countries are having access to that part of the world. So the thinking in Washington is that, and President Trump in particular, is that we need to control that place. The moment we control, in any future war, we would then deny your opponent
Much oil, shipping activity.
So that's one.
You're wrong.
That's one.
So there
is also critical minerals. So that's one. Other factors that your critical minerals are in as Greenland loses your ice melting with climate change, they're now discovering lots and lots of critical mineral, which United States wants to have control. It's having huge issues on rare earth in particular with China at the moment, and therefore getting hold of that, it's something that is uppermost important.
Before we go to the detail, I mean, I want to come back to Greenland. I thought the people who want Greenland, it's the PayPal mafia, the tech giants. And they want Greenland because the data centers have a difficulty of cooling systems. And Greenland is like just ice. I thought that's the urgent need, because what I can't comprehend, this is your ally. It's not like Venezuela. It's people, there's 58,000 people there. Denmark is your ally. You are part of NATO. You already have a naval base there. You've had it since World War II. The only reason, if you want to control shipping activities, you just have to push your NATO partners. But also you've got military presence. You can disrupt, like they are doing outside Venezuela in the Atlantic. They've seized 5 ships. They'll seize more of Russian and Chinese barrels of oil. You don't need to take over the island. Why take it over if it's about control of shipping routes? Even here in South Africa, you just have to have a base in Simonstown, have a cooperation with South Africa, then dictate. But why take over? Why say we want green land, we want to run it, sell it to us, or we're going to take it?
So I think the PayPal mafia issue is not relevant because Denmark is quite willing to extend Greenland to American businesses. That's not an issue. Let's also just note, Denmark has been a very close ally of the US. Until last year, purchased all their weapons from the United States, not from other European states, from the US, right? Per capita, Denmark has contributed more soldiers to American adventures than any other country.
Yes.
Right? So there's three main reasons here. One is the critical minerals. So of what the US regards as critical minerals, 50 of them, Denmark has already, we know, 43. There might be more as, right? The second one is the shipping lanes issue. So there's 2 sets of shipping lanes. One is on the east. The vast, it passes mostly Russian coast. And the other on the west, passing mostly Canadian coast. The Canadians have been very reluctant to allow non-Canadian ships to use it, right? Which affected the Americans as well. Secondly, the ice melting is faster on the Russian side than on the Canadian side. So the Canadian one, it's expected that lane will be open throughout the year by 2050 when the ice melts. On the Russian side by 2030. In 5 years' time, that lane will be able to be used continuously throughout the year. China, using that lane, gets to Europe 4,000 kilometers less than any other.
Than with the Suez Canal, yes.
Right? And then there's also other choke points along the way, right? So from that economic perspective, it's extremely important. Now, the fact that the US has problems with Canada is not willing to open it up as easily, is one of the issues. The third one, which arguably is the most important, is a strategic one, right? And that is that if you think of the map from the globe from the top, right? You look at the tip of Alaska and Russia. There's water of 83 kilometers separating the two. They're neighbors, right? There's a piece of Russia, on the other side is China, right? So that whole area, from an American strategic perspective, is entirely, is extremely important. They want Greenland because that's where you can set up surveillance stations, radars, all of that kind of thing, to be able to surveil not only into Russia, but also further into China. Right? When we look at a flat map, we don't get the idea of that, but that's what it looks like.
But why take over? I mean, this is the point.
This is a good question, because
all of the three aspects you are speaking about don't, in my head, they don't justify. You already are getting what you are getting. The purchase offer was made already in the 1940s. It was denied, but they give you full access, including surveillance technologies. That was what was happening already during the war.
Why take it over is because the current situation, let's say the situation up to last year, works as long as you have a strong NATO and NATO that cooperates. Trump is not interested in NATO, right? He's quite happy to risk NATO falling apart on this issue. And if NATO falls apart, which is, in a sense, his objective, he wants to pull out bases, etc., he doesn't want the US to continue protecting Europe, essentially from itself, but yeah, right? So if NATO falls apart, the access to Greenland could be restricted. The access to the shipping routes could be restricted. But if he takes over Greenland...
It doesn't matter what happens.
It doesn't matter what happens to NATO.
I don't know.
Who becomes an enemy.
I think in addition to, of which I agree with him, we also have to go back to the thinking of the current administration.
In the US.
In the US. That, yes, I agree that there's nothing new, but there are certain nuances that we need to look. Unlike Biden, some of the things that President Trump is mentioning, Biden also wanted to achieve more or less the same, but using a different strategy and methodology. What Trump has done, which is new, is to throw away that pretense that you work collectively with Western fellow
soft power.
Throw that away. Number two, you need legitimacy to do that. That's why with all other moves in Iran, in Iraq, and other areas, there was a move going to UN, try to get a resolution, and he doesn't want that. He just one man, one country, old imperialist way, and just do what we can. What he calls, we need peace through strength. So what he means is he needs the entire Northern America. So including Canada, he made some moves on Canada. So you talk about Greenland, Canada, moving into Venezuela. So you're looking at a pattern of ensuring that the entire North America, and South and North, become US. And this is in relation of looking at Russia. Russia is the largest country in the world in the long term. And China is quite big. So you're going to go three centers of power in the world: United States, Russia, China, in his own thinking. And therefore, the noise that is coming from Europe or any other country, try to say something, we don't listen. We only listen to power through the barrel of the gun. So that's the thinking.
Okay, I want to introduce, whilst you're here, Nigeria. And in your analysis, Nigeria's interest relates to the petrodollar. So the bombing that took place, or the strikes that took place with regards to a claim about Christians being executed and killed, you are saying that has to do with this America's thirst or hunger to control oil, to retain the power of the dollar. Just explain for us now in reference to Nigeria.
Nigeria is quite important is the most with the largest number of Africans. It has strategic minerals. It has oil. Also, Nigeria, in the entire region, there has been some activities in which France, a very close ally of the United States, and the United States itself have military bases around that area. They've lost ground with the military coups that is taking place in Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Central Africa and other areas. And therefore, the entry into Africa and looking at competition with China and others who are entering Africa. Not only China, you have Russia moving in, you have Gulf states moving in, and therefore Nigeria become a critical country. And we're starting to hear the noise and rumblings only when Nigeria entered BRICS. Way before United States had no issues with Nigeria. Now Nigeria is a member of BRICS. Issues are now starting to come in as much as South Africa as a BRICS member, because it's no longer following 100% US. There are certain areas where Nigeria is not taking.
And BRICS has a plan. It has an open plan to get away from the dollar
and to challenge the US hegemony.
Yeah.
And therefore, to reassert itself, Nigeria is therefore use a pretext. In Venezuela, you use drug cartels as a pretext to move in. In South Africa, genocide on Afrikaners. In Nigeria, Christians. So these are pretexts. We need to go much more deeper to see the reason why, through the lenses that one sees more of reasserting US power and dominance in the world in relation to other rising powers.
Let's bring in Iran.
Let me just add to that.
Okay.
So I agree with everything David said about Nigeria, but one additional thing. This Christian thing is not just a pretext. Trump is setting himself up as the savior of white people globally, hence the white genocide story, hence linking up with right-wing parties in Europe, as opposed to the sitting governments, right? Now he's also putting himself...
Does it matter if those whites are not Christian?
Yes, because it's whites, and whites are under attack.
Whites in general.
Whites are under attack,
okay.
Right? But now there's also the Christian element, right? Remember, his base is heavily evangelical Christian, and heavy evangelical Christian activity in Nigeria funded by his base. That money comes from the US, that's a large part of it, right? So he's also playing to that base. He's now the white savior, or the savior of whites. He wants to become the savior of Christians globally. And so that will build him a base both in the United States, among his white and Christian followers, as well as outside, from that kind of a constituency globally. And ultimately, he wants to be seen as a global emperor, not just the president of the United States.
I see that. I mean, sticking with oil, the pretext here is Trump wouldn't care that blacks were killing each other in Nigeria, whether over religion or ethnicity. There are more blacks dying elsewhere, which is not far in the Sahel, in Sudan. He has no interest. Yeah. The idea is that is Nigeria's strategic role in the oil trade and it being part of BRICS. And the next country is Iran. If we are going with that framework. And I mean, Naeem, I don't know. Trump has said that it's his next target. His threat is very clear, is linked to the protests. Maybe as a point of departure, what's your reading of the mass demonstrations happening in Iran? Are they anti-regime?
So one thing we must just say is that Iran has almost as many protests per day as South Africa. All over the place.
Over what?
Over things like prices, over things like service delivery, as we call it, right? All the time. Worker strikes. Every day there's protests taking place. They don't always become national like this, same as in South Africa, right? When these protests started, they started just over 2 weeks ago as a protest against rising cost of living, rising prices, fall in the value of the currency of the rial, right? And these are legitimate concerns. Iran has been under sanctions for 47 years. And no other country in the world has had such sanctions for such a long period.
Except Cuba.
Except Cuba, right? 47 years? Yes, I think, yeah.
Possibly more.
Possibly
in
more.
Cuba, it's
Right.
actually more. Yes.
More, it's longer, yeah.
It's an actual
From
embargo.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, from the 60s. This was from 79, right? So, so 47 years of sanctions, which of course has really messed up the economy. These protests, when they started on that basis. It was economic issues, cost of living, etc. By Thursday, a few days ago, it kind of, so that was like the 10th day or so, we started seeing the rise of the rhetoric against the regime. That is genuinely there, right? And that is there because there are various grievances, not only the economic, but other grievances about the regime, social, political, etc. So that started happening. But around the same time, not because of that, but around the same time, what we also saw was the insertion of the kind of foreign agenda into it. Now, I'm not saying that people are upset at the regime because they're foreign agents. People are upset at the regime for various reasons, right? But it's an opportunity for Israel in particular. So we know that from the June war last year, Iran is heavily infiltrated by Iran is heavily infiltrated by Israeli agents, both Israelis, but also proxies that are paid by the Mossad. Iranians, yes. Right? That's how they got the intelligence for all the people they assassinated, etc. So particularly from around Wednesday, Thursday last week, we saw increasingly that there were in the protests armed people with automatic rifles. Over this weekend, according to the Iranian government, and we can say you take all figures with a pinch of salt because we don't really know exactly what's happening, but they're saying by this morning 109 police people or security forces were killed, right? Ambulances have been attacked, fire engines have been attacked, mosques and shrines have been burnt, banks have been attacked, firefighters have been attacked while fighting fires. I don't believe that this is from the protesters, right? These are other elements. I mean, there are videos taken by the assailants themselves of them firing automatic rifles against police people, right? So in the June war, what we saw was that Israel launched an attack on Iran and hoped that people will come out into the street to support the attack. The opposite happened. This time they flipped the script. This time the protests happened, and they're now trying to get on the back of that protest. So the Iranians clearly believe that this is the case, that there is now an opportunistic foreign agenda. Trump, of course, helps with that belief by saying that he's going to intervene. There are numerous tweets saying that. The Israelis help in that by boasting that their agents are in the protests itself. The Iranians take it so seriously that last week they issued this notice, notice to emissions. Basically, they've created no-fly zones over parts of Iran. What this means is that people who are controlling anti-aircraft guns or batteries, for example, have the power to fire them off if any aircraft comes into that area without having to get authorization, right? Why? Because they believe that they're on the cusp of that happening, that at any moment Israeli or American planes could come over. So we have in parallel, it's not, and this is the problem, people often try to say, is it this or that? It's in parallel. On the one hand, we have protesters who have legitimate grievances against the state for the economy and for other things. And on the other hand, we have foreign agents that are using the protests opportunistically, quite possibly to launch a war in the next few days.
But it would seem to me that the Iranians who don't want the regime, There may not be a majority, I don't know, but foreign agents must find collaboration.
Mhm.
Sometimes it might be a genuine collaboration. There are people who are opposed, who want the return of the Shah regime, for instance. And they are Iranians. They are not a foreign agent. It's people who believe this Islamic Republic must fall. We must go to something that is more Western, or something that, even if it's a royal family, but doesn't impose this and that. But I do want to ask a nuance about if the United States were to take the action as it says it will, what could nuclear sites? I see there are no civilians; it's mostly soldiers. Maybe you could do targets and say these were nuclear sites. You do strikes. So the promise of Trump, if the regime kills protesters, we're going to intervene. What likely would that take? What form? What are we looking at? This promise of Trump.
Yeah.
In your reading, if the intervention of the United States takes place in Iran, what form is it going to take?
So there's two. I mean, there's the U.S. and there's Israel. From the U.S. perspective, I don't believe that Trump necessarily wants a regime change. He wants a regime he can control, similar to Venezuela, right? But possible targets, oil installations, oil refineries, etc.
You didn't just say a regime he can control is not the regime change. Because Venezuela,
Agreed.
that is regime change.
Agreed. You're right.
If somebody in Iran tomorrow, the Ayatollah, if he starts saying we're getting out of BRICS, we're going to use the petrol, that's regime change.
Yes. In a sense, you're right.
Okay.
The people might be the same.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So there's various economic sites that could make good targets, right? So apart from nuclear, missile sites. Again, very secretive, hidden, etc. But for Israel right now, Iran's missiles are the bigger concern because there's no nuclear weapon. They know that, the Americans know that.
And they don't have the capacity for missile confrontation with...
No. I mean, for decades, Iran has been manufacturing, some estimates say, up to 300 missiles a month, right? So they have huge stocks. Whatever they lost in June, they've replenished. So those possible sites, wherever they suspect they might be, but economic sites, so you bring the economy to the ground. If they want to go further, and the Israelis would prefer this kind of thing, is the parliament building, for example, possible sites where Khamenei, the supreme leader, might be residing. I don't think that the Americans have that appetite, but the Israelis do. So if it's a joint attack, the Israeli objective would be decapitation. And the Israelis would prefer complete political chaos.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who is the Maduro in Iran? Should the United States take an option of you're committing crimes against humanity, you're killing protesters? Who could, if they take the route, who could they abduct?
Well, then the ultimate target would be Khamenei. I don't think that that's going to be possible. I mean, Khamenei is extremely well protected, and would probably prefer to die than be abducted, right? The president is the president. He runs the government, but Khamenei is higher than him, right? So that would, from an Israeli perspective, that would be the ideal target. I think from an American perspective, that wouldn't be the target. Trump would prefer to have Khamenei remaining in place and make a deal with him, right? Whatever the terms of that deal might be.
Prof, how does this service the oil control? And Iran that is in complete disarray, does it achieve United States control over the global supply of oil to its sort of strategic competitor, China and Russia?
Oh, indeed. I think there are a number of factors at play here. I think we need to see that the United States wants to move from Middle East, long-term plan. back to the North America, restructuring, move troops from Europe and Eurasia, have strategic partners in the Middle East. Israel itself are playing a critical role as the core power, and have your Japan, less extent, your South Korea and others. But having control over or reducing the power of the current regime in Iran has an advantage for United States. The trade that is going on. Iran has signed more than $400 billion trade with China, for instance. There's a direct pipeline oil that goes to China from Iran. And the factor that we've already mentioned, the petrodollar usage, and having a hold, whether through destruction of facilities, reducing that power, it will make China find alternative energy sources. But there's a lot of miscalculation and misunderstanding of China. China is moving faster on the solar and alternative energy. Even if you look at Venezuela, if truth is to be told, China really can do without Venezuelan oil. It's discovering oil on its own, within its own neighborhood. It's moving faster on alternative energy, building hydropower massively, nuclear massively, solar. And therefore, there's a whole things that are taking place within China itself to an extent that it can withstand. What United States have done quite wrong in a calculation was to give China heads up of what they're going to do much earlier on. And President Xi prepared for this to an extent that, of course, there will be challenge here and there, but I doubt very much that it will bring China
a little bit
down.
about that. But anybody looking at the global situation at the moment, I'm not convinced, and I think there's a lot of grounds for that the United States really wants a war with China. I mean, all of this that is happening, as you say, it's about control of trade routes and the return or the restoration of the dollar, strength of the dollar. But even with Iran, and I'll get back to you, Naeem, please think about it. No one is going to come to Iran's rescue. Not Russia, not China. Should there be a military intervention? That's not China's style. Certainly, Russia got a good lesson in Syria, but in a way, it is stretched around its war with the Ukraine. China is not a friend that comes to help you fight a bully. But is the US on a search for a direct confrontation with China?
I doubt very much. I think United States does not want to go in a direct fight with Russia, nor does it want to go direct fight with China, because it is not guaranteed to win those wars. And therefore, I think what United States wants is a much more control economy and a number of technology and markets. I think that power is the power that the United States wants to have. So when it comes to China, China does not have military alliances. And therefore, I think its rise is different from your Western rise and notion of hegemony. China's own is that we can win a war without firing gun.
A single bullet.
Yes.
Except when it comes to
direct national at home, indeed.
Yeah.
So go to war, but go in a defensive. You protect your area. You look at the military strategy. It's not an offensive one. Go and cause wars, but in a more defensive posture. And therefore, I think the dynamics over Iran are quite disturbing, not just to China. They're disturbing to South Africa as well. So as we discuss South Africa in our deep waters, we are exercising with the Iranians, the Chinese, as well as the Russians. So what's happening in Iran has direct implication on us and the African continent.
Before I come to the situation here, I do want to pose that question which will be my last question. I don't know, Naeem, you want to react to China is Iran's good friend, so is Russia. Would you agree that no one is going to come to the rescue of the Iranians? What we're seeing in Palestine, what we're seeing in Venezuela, will attain in Iran. There's not a single weak or strong country that will say that's an attack on sovereignty in Iran. It's an attack on all of us. No one.
So let me make a point about oil first, a quick point, just following on that. We mentioned Venezuela, we mentioned Iran. In between these two, in terms of oil reserves, the country with the second largest oil reserves is Saudi Arabia, right? Saudi Arabia Saudi Arabia is the one that made the deal with the US that established the petrodollar.
Yes.
Saudi Arabia is now moving away from that.
Yes.
Saudi Arabia has a deal with China to supply it with oil for 20 years, I think, right? But more importantly, as part of that deal with China, Saudi Arabia, and that is not paid for in dollars, right? As part of the deal with China for the oil, Saudi Arabia asked China to facilitate an agreement with Iran. Because particularly after the American withdrawal from Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia has decided that you can't rely on the United States for your security. The whole petrodollar thing was, we prop up the dollar and you give us security. That's no longer the case, right? And so in the region, they want to have a regional arrangement that will protect them, not expect protection from outside. Hence the deal with the Iranians, right? And that deal, by the way, survives and deepens as time goes on. But coming to your question about Iran, no one else is going to step in. Iran is on its own. If the United States and Israel attack Iran, it is on its own. No state is going to come to its assistance. With the possibility, whether we can call that a state or not, with the possibility of the Ansar line in Yemen, right? Who have, the very admirable courage to, at whatever cost, to do whatever they want. But no state is going to come to their assistance. Not Russia.
I might have to come in here. Okay. When we talk about no country will come to us militarily, you don't need foreign troops to come to you. I think you get assistance through having satellites of other countries, getting weapons. So as it stands, Iran is receiving weapons and it's buying weapons from China.
But if somebody
J10,
Prof, if Trump does what he says he's gonna do,
yes,
your response can be, I'll open satellites for you to communicate. I'll give you water.
No, it can't.
Or I'm saying that what do you expect from a friend?
Yeah.
If report is defense of the arrangement that this is a country that is sovereign.
If the reports that we are receiving that Iran has been able to jam the Starlink, the popular Starlink, one would suspect that one of its core allies is assisting. And therefore, in any global war, assistance comes in different form. It can come in terms of intelligence. You're given intelligence.
I see.
You're given
that's everything. That is why are you struggling to accept that?
No. I am accepting, but the point I'm making,
Venezuela.
Yes.
You would have thought, with all that Venezuela was, Venezuela in the entire Latin America and the Caribbean, together with Cuba, are the countries that stuck to the value system of a communist, arrangement of society, and very faithful to the Chinese alliance and the Russians. And Maduro was taken. And the Americans, what they did, they broadcasted it thereafter. Yeah. They humiliated him in front of the whole world. Life went on as business as usual. You cannot outrule,
of course,
the fact that they can They have confidence. It has emboldened them. I think it was a proper inside job. History will absolve or take us there on those terms. But I don't think what happened to Maduro is United States powerful capacity that is unmatched in the world. I think it was an inside job. Naeem says there is equal, if not worse, infiltration within Iran.
Yes.
If they take the Ayatollah, there will not be a World War III. Actually, the Russians will condemn like they did with Venezuela. Chinese will say, release him. 2 weeks later, they are speaking about...
They won't be a war. Well, firstly, I don't believe that they'd be able to take him. But let's assume that they do.
Yes.
There won't be a World War III. But what you will see is the whole region going up in flames. And the Iranians have already said that if the Americans attack, they have in their targets American bases in the region. They would mine the Straits of Hormuz, which 20-30% of oil in the world goes through. They'll attack Israeli assets, etc. If it's so serious, not just bombing, but kidnapping Khamenei, for example, it'll get much worse than that. I think you will see assets rise.
You think there will be much more consequences regionally than in Venezuela?
Yes, regionally, but also if it's that bad, where Khamenei gets kidnapped, I think you'll see repercussions in the U.S. I think we'd be foolish. But Saddam was a small player compared to Iran, compared to what Iran is.
But we had a case of Syria. Assad was rescued by the Russians overnight. So we have a case here where friends will come and assist. Unfortunately, Muammar Gaddafi could not be assisted by the Russians.
Or the South Africans.
Or the South Africans, for that matter.
And the South Africans voted in favor.
1971 and 1973, yes.
And I was about to say, 53, the Americans had regime change in Iran.
Yes.
1953.
Yeah.
So the situation differs. I think for me, I would say Iran is not Venezuela. Iran will be defeated in a long run, but the damage that they come out as far as Israel is concerned, and I agree with them in the region, is massive. There might not be a third world war, but wars are not planned, as I always say. They always come as an accident. You never know. It's a region that is known for chemical weapons usage. We also know the very same forces at play. So a lot of accidents could take place. This has a huge implication.
Let's come back home. There's agitations. I've seen Israeli media, lots of radical Zionists mobilizing for U.S. intervention in South Africa.
Yes.
And I think Elon Musk's irritation about 150 laws discriminating against whites, BEE, and all of that over the last few days also is some form of agitation. Something must be done in South Africa. So I'll ask, maybe I'll start with you, Naeem, and Prof can close the conversation with us for us in that light. My question is, should the US take action on South Africa? What form will it take?
I think South Africa is a little different. Both Venezuela and Iran are, in a sense, politically, diplomatically, more isolated than South Africa is. Before you get to the kind of Venezuela stage with South Africa, there's a lot of weapons or tools that the Americans have. Sanctions, for example, right? So lots of economic screws that can be turned by the US. And I think that could be the possible way out. I don't think that they're going to send in special forces to kidnap Ramaphosa, right? Or to bomb Palapala, right? So there's a long way to go, I think, before that. And South Africa does have kind of friends more than Iran, or at least at the diplomatic level, not militarily, right? That will come out in its support. So I don't think that kind of a scenario is something that we can expect.
But are we far?
Are we?
Delta Force, it's just like
No, we're not.
across the ocean. I mean, even for Nigeria's president to be kidnapped.
Yeah. No, we're not far. We're not. I mean, the US has assets all over the place. In Africa, they have bases in how many countries? 40 some odd countries, right? Whether it's a training base or full-on base, whatever the case is. They can mobilize AFRICOM as they will, right? They have ships all over the place. They can start moving those. So, from that perspective, we're not far away, geographically speaking. But in terms of the kinds of actions that the US would take, I think we're not close to a military invasion or kidnapping of our president.
Or a military strike.
A military strikes. Yeah.
So your concrete answer is we may have to expect sanctions
That's a possibility.
on some leaders, or full-on sanctions to the country.
Both.
Yeah.
Yes, sanction plus more. I think the impact that if I were an advisor to the president, here's what I would say to the president.
Yeah.
That the 1994 project was based on an understanding that South Africa, a democratic country, is part of these international community. Look at the liberation movements. Both the liberation movement, the apartheid government, believed in internationalism for different reasons. The apartheid for white race, and while liberation movements for unitary and therefore South Africa is at the forefront of believing in universal human rights and the like. It's in the forefront. And therefore, I think it's high time for South Africa to fully understand that world order is no more. That's first. The world order of human rights, of solidarity and the like, is dying.
Declaration.
It's dying. And therefore, there's a need to think and the lenses in which foreign policy is made. One, contingence plan. Should a war happen, where will South Africa stand? We don't know. Number two, should all the oil and destabilization and shipping lanes happen, our trade is with Asia and the like, how are we going to survive? And therefore, I think we need to have a plan in domestically and continentally. To what extent should we limit access to oil from far fields and buy from Namibia, buy from Nigeria? We're already doing that. I think we need to do more in Angola so that we reduce the risk. But far beyond that, we also need to explain to our people in terms of the basic understanding that even if we appear to be close and exercising naval exercise with China, Russia, and Iran, we do the same with the United States. We do the same with Europe. And therefore, we are a non-aligned country.
We have not taken
We
sides.
don't take sides. I think we need to do more of explanation that our position is not to take sides, but we need to believe in something.
Why has anybody not named the problem? Because the obvious question is, what the hell are they waiting for? Why is it not a natural reaction for the South African government to have come out full on to explain its position in light of all the activity in the Arctic, in the Atlantic? You have there's a joint naval exercise taking place on such and such a date for over 2 days. 5 or 7 days before, certain international developments occur. They haven't come out and taken all these positions that you are saying.
I think
What's wrong with Derko? What's wrong with the cupcake?
I think the president does explain some of these issues, but I think what we're saying is that more need to be done. and needs to be done at the highest level in terms of where South Africa stands today and the kind of contingents, what it will do. So the belief in Europe that will come to our side, because I think the question you've been posing was more into China won't come to our side. But Europe won't come to our side either.
Yes.
And therefore, who are we going to stand with? So therefore, we need to have a clear plan. Should a global conflict happen, do we have essential goods in the country? I think COVID taught us a lesson. We need to go beyond that to have those contingent.
May I complicate this? We're left with 5 minutes.
Sure.
I don't think there will be any full-on sanctions on South Africa.
I don't think so either.
And that's not because of anything other than the fact that we are in this historically unique position that there is a significant naturalized white community that would be affected, in whose name is precisely the reason why America is making all the other threats.
No,
Because if they put on full-on sanctions, their President Meg used to call in relation to Zimbabwe, for instance, is it Keith and Keen or something?
Keith and Keen.
Yeah, there is a significant population of interest.
Indeed.
It is the reason why they are agitated in the first place, by a narrative of a white genocide, Afrikaner genocide, to be specific. They don't think we're killing any other whites, but they're Afrikaners. And they've done an Afrikaner refugee program. If you are Jewish, I don't think you benefit from that program, since its definition is it's about Afrikaner refugees, or if you're Italian, Greek, and we have South Africans of those nationalities. Full-on sanctions surely would have a devastating effect, particularly for the population of interest in South Africa. Before you come in,
Sure.
quick reaction.
Sure.
Yeah. Look, I agree. I don't think there'll be full-on sanctions.
But you agree with the reason why?
I don't think that South Africa is as important to the United States that it needs to do that. As for the reason, I don't think that that's the valid reason, because you implement full sanctions and then you say that we'll accept white refugees. So whites have a way of escaping, and only black people will suffer. Right? So that's.
So would they go?
Huh?
They haven't taken the offer.
They won't go. But from Trump's perspective, we're giving you a way out. If you don't want to take it, well, then,
Imagine the sanctions then. The businesses that are getting sanctioned really. The economic power that is getting sanctioned really.
But is that how Trump looks at it? He doesn't look at. He's much more black and white than that. But just to differ with David on one point, I think that the idea that we must come to grips with the fact that we're living in a different world where international solidarity don't matter. I think that we should be pushing in the opposite direction. I think that what we are seeing is that while this rules-based order, international law, etc., is being completely savaged by the United States and even by some Europeans, that these things are being taken on by others, particularly in the global South, right? We might not talk about international solidarity in the same way as the non-aligned movement used to in its heyday. But BRICS, in a sense, with all its contradictions, and there are lots, in a sense, there is some kind of a solidarity. The fact that India and China, which often are at war with each other, are in the same alliance, are trading in oil in a different currency to the dollar, right? Means something. So there's a new form of solidarity, of alliance, etc., that's developing. And instead of saying that we must accept the reality that the North is imposing on us, what we must do is strengthen a new reality and create that as the way to deal with it.
Start with accepting that it has been ravaged or savaged, as you said. That the in the head of the United States, when you relate with them, you can no longer use the framework of a rule-based order. I'm not defending you. You are here. You'll do it yourself.
Yeah.
That's the call of David is when you engage at the moment in understanding the US's actions, and when you think about the diplomatic relationship with them, including Europe, you have to accept that the framework of the United Nations Charter is not something they're going to respect. With everything that was weak about the world order as we knew it, people used to take WTO seriously. It's one of the institutions that, was functional. But there are other institutions that are still standing. IMF is still there. World Bank is still there. You haven't had a lot of agitation from the United States around those institutions because in many ways they remain instruments of their power.
Yeah.
Even withdrawing from organizations in the world, including the United Nations, you don't hear about the real institutions that have harassed the Global South. IMF, World Bank, the Security Council. They've not said much about the Security Council. But if you are South Africa and you still operate on the basis that these chaps, when you say the sovereign right of Venezuela, they will hear you. But the challenge you're giving us, I think it's proper.
Yeah.
What new forms of solidarity are possible outside of the US?
It's also a matter of how you communicate, and our government is very bad at that. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're communicating Venezuela from a South African government perspective to the global South, that's the language you use. But when you're communicating to the US, there's no need to talk about sovereignty and international law but when you're communicating to the Europeans, at least most of the current power elite, and that might change because it's moving more right-wing, they still rhetorically have that sense, right? But finally, let me say, although we're very bad with communications, our government that is, it's not true that we're not doing anything about this. What is an attack from the United States? We are under attack from the United States, right? The kind of muscular, assertive position that South Africa, even our very amenable president, took around the G20, for example, doesn't just come out of the fact that he suddenly woke up one morning and, grew a backbone. It's because it came after his visits to the East. He went to China, he went to Vietnam, he went to Indonesia. And what he got out of that was that these are credible partners. They want to partner with South Africa. They want to buy our stuff.
Yeah.
They want to, right? And the idea that is building is that, do we really need the United States? Is it really a problem for us if we get kicked out of AGOA? No, in fact, there are American think tanks that say that if South Africa is kicked out of AGOA,
it's useless.
The US will lose more than we will.
Yes,
right?
But AGOA will be useless.
When they pulled out aid, it wasn't that. Yes, I know many health workers in NGOs lost their jobs, etc., had no income, right? But in the bigger scheme of things, it didn't. No. So there's this sense that, and so what I'm saying is the South African government is doing something.
Yes.
They don't communicate it well enough, because we'd like to know that they are, but you get the sense from these kinds of things.
But David, I want you to go back to the original. You could obviously respond to the rest of these things. The full-on sanctions are unthinkable for somebody who is an extreme right-winger in the US and whose interest is the Keith and King.
Yeah, but we have to be quite careful. Whether you get full sanction or targeted sanction, as they call them, is the case of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has never had any full sanctions, just targeted.
Agreed.
But markets operate differently. The moment you have targeted sanction, as was the case with Zimbabwe, the perception globally is that people won't invest in your country because the most powerful countries has issues with you. And therefore, whether they target few individuals, still the country is full sanction.
Will these trends, naive speaking about, come to rescue?
But we will have trade with others. Some disagree. But I think my point is that solidarity is important. I think my point is that South Africa somehow is saving democracy. It's more democratic than the United States. I think it's going on. I think we need to now think beyond the old arguments that the United States is the only place we need to have. I think we need to think in a more strategic and start to say, what are our red lines? What areas were no-go area, and be very clear. United States sees South Africa as critical it's very important to United States. From a military position, geographically where South Africa is, as was during the Cold War and now, and any possible future conflicts. South Africa has critical minerals, and those are key to United States. There's the Simon Town that you mentioned, and a number of factors in terms of the population and just general the influence South Africa has on the African continent and in the global South. So, and United States wouldn't say South Africa is not that important. It is critical. That's why he's constantly angry with the position that South Africa is taking in the global arena. And therefore, what I would advise the government is that let's have contingent plans and let's be very clear. Should there be conflict? Should our relationship with the US go? Already something is being done, I agree. I think your butterfly strategy, or we are now trading more with countries and new players, Latin America. We're spreading so that we don't put all our eggs in one basket, as was the case.
There's also a domestic responsibility. And here I think the South African government is failing. As much as on the global level, all of those things are correct. And that is that within the country, within South Africa, there's an enormous amount of wealth that is not being invested, that is being held back, right? By the private sector, by domestic capital. And that'll be, if we have targeted sanctions, that's gone. That's not going to be invested. But it's the responsibility of the South African government to help unlock that, to create the confidence for domestic capital to invest. And how do they do that? By the government itself investing in the country. Where is all our infrastructure development that will create jobs and that will convince capital that this is a place that's worth investing in, right? We keep complaining, poverty, inequality, unemployment, right? But you don't want to spend the money to unlock it. And the money is there. And that, I think, is, as we talk about Iran, that there's domestic concerns and then there's a foreign agenda. We're talking here about the foreign agenda, but the way to mitigate that is to do your work domestically, and our government is not.
Maybe in 7 days we'll reconstitute this stress ban. I don't know. Your prediction is there will be something happening in Iran in 7 or 14 days.
Yes.
From the United States, joint action with Iran.
With Israel, yes.
Yeah. And your prediction as well, 7 days?
Yeah, I think when you look at both Israel, I doubt very much United States will go openly. I think
and not fully.
My own prediction is that it will be Israel, but backed by United States.
Backed by the United States.
And Israel trying to drag the US in.
Yeah. Naim Jeenah, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Professor Monyae.
Thank you.
Nah.
Da.
That's it. Thank you very much, comrades.
Thank you.